California Executive Director of the USDA Farm Service Agency. We also have Nikki Linnerman. Nikki is the President of the Stanislaus-Tuolumne County Central Labor Council. We have Steve Frisch present with us this morning. Steve is the President of the Sierra Business Council. We have Tom Hallinan with us this morning, and Tom is the Vice Chair and a Trustee with the Yosemite Community College District. Tom, I know I saw you here. I'm sure he will walk back in shortly. And we also have Don Calamucci with the Smart Cities Prevail who are here. So we have some folks who are going to be looking at this from the public sector. We've got people here from the private sector, and we'll have an opportunity to first have them each introduce themselves, talk a little bit about the area that you represent and the geographies that you include.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And thank you so much for inviting me to participate on this panel, and I'm looking forward to the comments of my colleagues here this morning. I am currently a member of the State Board of Equalization. I represent the 1st Equalization District, which spans along the northern and central California coast from Del Norte County to Santa Barbara, including the entire San Francisco Bay Area. And easternmost, I represent Yolo County, Colusa County, and after the most recent redistricting, this equalization district will also include Tehama and Glenn County. So it's a fairly big district geographically, but it is representative of a quarter of the population here in California. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. What I wanted to do is to let me tell you what we do. We serve as the tax adjudication body for the state of California. I am one of 5 members serving that capacity on the board. The environmental issues and looking at the particular effects of existing communities. But I think the conversation really hasn't changed to where it's focused on what's the potential? What's the potential? And are there ways, if we're thinking about better connection and that we are able to look at potentially the emergence of new communities being developed? And so when you look at that and look at the potential of where we could have new communities being developed, you've got new infrastructure potential, you've got new schools that may be able to be located because people are able to get to locations a lot easier. That conversation really hasn't been taking place fully. And so there is a sector of, particularly the business community, that's already existing along the Central Valley Corridor who are thinking along those lines. Now obviously businesses are motivated differently, but I do think there's an aspect of their thinking that warrants some attention with respect to what can really happen in terms of new communities being developed with the high-speed rail project. But we learned with respect to this last recession that, not a lot has changed with respect to our financial markets. We're trying to, the banks are still in business and doing what they do well, and we're hopeful that we're going to be a little smarter about how we deal with not entering into another housing crisis with building new housing and developing new subdivisions. The last thing I will say about business development in rural counties is this. I hope that we can have a broader view with respect to what can happen in rural counties. And yes, we can be aspirational, we can be optimistic, we can be hopeful, but I think we can also be realistic about what can happen, and that we ought to see some of these opportunities. And particularly as it relates to things like high-speed rail, as it relates to, as UC Merced now is entering into a period of time where they have really been, I think, just a center of development around Merced. But just looking at those possibilities, looking at what could really emerge from what's already there, expanding our thinking in terms of what can happen in the rural sector. And frankly, it's, if it weren't for the agricultural sector, California's economy would be doing much, much worse. And we ought to value that sector. We ought to look at how we can invest more in that sector to be sure that it continues to grow. It is a sector that, frankly, produces products of high quality that is the envy of the world, and exports is really a huge segment of our California economy. But just the notion that as people have this perception about rural California, I think the mindset of that has to change. We actually are attracting, rural California actually attracts a very, very high quality workforce. and particularly around, as I said, academic centers, but now with much of what we've seen with respect to the interest in green tech, there are businesses that do want to establish and employers that are looking at rural California.
Hand up, ladies, can you hear me in the back? Right. As Chris mentioned, my name is Val Dolcini. I'm the State Executive Director of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Farm Service Agency. I'm one of two political appointees at USDA in California. The other is Glenda Humiston, who some of you may know. Glenda is the State Director for the Rural Development Agency. I was appointed by the President in 2009, and prior to that, I was appointed by President Clinton to serve in this role. In between those two jobs, I worked with Betty in the Gray Davis administration and did a variety of things in the private sector. But before that, I started my political career with Congressman Vic Fazio, who represented a district in north central California. And my first job in politics in DC was opening letters in Nancy Pelosi's office. And from there, I was able to move up the ranks a little bit and provide some input to her. He was a great member to work for us with Mr. Fazio. Way before that, my grandfather was appointed by President Roosevelt to serve as the postmaster of Davis in the 1930s. And then when he passed, he was succeeded by my grandmother, who was one of the first postmistresses in California. She was appointed by President Truman in 1945. So my bona fides as a fellow Democrat, I think, speak for themselves. And the work that I do in rural California really, I think, supports what our party has done, not only around the nation, but here in California over the last many years. I should add for the record that I'm speaking to you today as a private citizen. Federal law does not allow me to speak as the State Executive Director, and I want to comply with federal law, of course. But I do want to tell you about the good work that we've done in rural California at the Department of Agriculture. We really provide, and Betty underscored this to a degree on the state side, we provide essential safety net programs to sustain rural communities. My agency works directly with farmers and ranchers to provide individualized financial assistance, and that could be recovering from a disaster, and we've had a number of natural disasters in California over the years. It could be providing conservation grants, it could be providing bioenergy grants, or it simply could be the extension of a much-needed operating loan or a farm.
California, my family founded a ranch in the foothills in 1852, and then the law office I work for was founded in 1923. In that practice, for 20 years I've been serving a dozen local agencies in both the foothills and the Central Valley region. I'm also on the Community College Board, the Yosemite Community College District, which again traverses both the valley and the foothills and touches just the tip of Santa Clara. I want to be very brief in my introduction so we can get to your questions, and tell you that when we do get to those questions, I will be very frank in my responses.
Hi, my name is Steve Frisch. I'm the president of the Sierra Business Council. We're a business organization based in Truckee, California, but covering about 17 counties in the Sierra Nevada region. And we work on promoting long-term sustainable economic development in the Sierra Nevada region. We have about 4,000 network members up and down the region. The Sierra Nevada, like many rural regions of the state, is a region of small businesses. 80% of the people employed in the private sector are employed by firms that have 10 employees or less. So we really focus in on this issue of sustaining local businesses, expanding markets and opportunities for local businesses, and as Betty referenced, trying to create new industry clusters within the region that can actually create additional opportunity. I'm going to stay brief as well, but I want to throw a couple of challenges out on the table for the question and answer period to promote that frankness. Last night there was a Take Back Red California dinner, and it is my observation that the reason we have to take back Red California is that somewhere along the line we left Red California. We left it to become red. And that if we really want to break down this urban-rural divide which separates our state, we really need to talk about and get engaged in the issues that are really important to rural residents and rural businesses. And that includes things like fair labor practices and paying fair wages and prevailing wage. It includes things like water policy and getting equity for rural communities. It includes things like long-term environmental improvement in rural communities, looking at pesticide issues, looking at forest management issues, looking at the point that rural residents on average have 65% of the average median income of the rest of Californians. There are big areas of rural California that aren't sufficiently covered by institutions of higher education.
Amen.
There's a great community college network in the Sierra Nevada, but there's no four-year university really in the Sierra Nevada region. So there are a lot of issues here about what we need to do in the state to make the state prosperous, to make the state progressive, to build that progressive business, labor, environmental, human and social services coalition. And a lot of them have to do with going back to some of the things that we did previously and going back to some of the values that our party had when it embraced New Deal philosophies in the 1930s. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dan Calamucci. I'm with Smart Cities Prevail. Smart Cities Prevail, we're a new organization that was founded as a response to what we see as the next front on the war on the middle class. And that's an attack on construction workers. It's an attack on their standard of living, and it's an attack on the laws that have sustained that standard of living for 90 years, and that's prevailing wage. You know, we see prevailing wage battles, we've seen these happen in communities around the state over the last few years. And they're in your communities. They're in places like Auburn and Redding, in Grover Beach, rural communities. And we've been able to beat that back over the last few years. We've actually been quite successful. But there are folks out there who are promising more attacks on prevailing wage in 30 to 40 cities across the state of California. So what we're here this weekend